You've probably heard the story of the Buddha's birth. And let's be honest, it sounds a lot like a fairy tale, right? A newborn baby just walks and talks and makes these huge declarations. But what if that story isn't just a myth? What if it's actually a code, a kind of symbolic language that's trying to describe a really profound psychological event? That's what we're going to dig into. I mean, just try to picture it. A baby takes 7 steps and announces, "I am the chief in the world." It's a pretty wild claim, but we're going to see how a deeper look at the original language completely transforms this story from some supernatural legend into, well, a kind of map of human potential. So ancient texts are just full of these stories that kind of challenge our modern ideas of what's possible. And the Buddha's birth story is definitely one of the biggest ones, packed with events that seem, well, impossible. And it's not just us who think it's incredible. The original Pali Sutta, which is the earliest record we have, uses these exact words, Acchariyaabbhutasutta. Even the Buddha's own followers called these events wonderful and marvelous. They were totally astonished by the story. But is that really all these words mean? This is where the real fun begins. We're going to crack the code of this ancient story by looking at it through 2 completely different lenses. We're going to put the standard, modern translation side by side with a translation that goes back to the original root meanings of the words. So, on one side, you've got the first translation, the standard one you'd find in most books, just based on dictionary definitions. But on the other side, our second translation goes way deeper. It's a method of analysis that tries to find the original intention behind the words. And this method actually has a name. It's called Niruti. It's this ancient way of doing linguistic analysis. Think of it like being a linguistic detective. It's a tool that helps you uncover clues that are hidden in plain sight, right there in the words themselves. So check this out. When we apply Niruti to those first words, Acchariyaabbhuta, the meaning shifts. Wonderful and marvelous becomes unprecedented and beyond the ordinary. See the difference? It goes from being something you might see in a fantasy movie to something that has literally never happened before. Something that breaks all the known rules of existence. All right, so let's take this method and apply it to the first part of the story, the Bodhisatta. That's the being who would become the Buddha, actually choosing to be born. The text says he came down from a heavenly realm called Tusita and entered his mother's womb. Now, the original text uses this phrase, sato sampajano, to describe this process. The standard translation is just mindful and aware, which, is nice, but it really doesn't capture the power of the original. The root meaning points to something way more profound, with an unbroken stream of full awareness. Think about what that implies. It means he didn't lose consciousness between one life and the next. He was fully, completely aware during that whole transition. And this theme of a completely different level of consciousness just keeps building throughout the story of the pregnancy and birth. It's not just about a special baby, it's about a totally new kind of awareness entering the world. At the very moment of conception, the text says this immeasurable, splendid light filled the entire universe. And that's not just a pretty image. It's a powerful metaphor, right? The arrival of this kind of consciousness is like a light of wisdom that just pushes away the darkness of ignorance, lighting up even the deepest, darkest corners of existence. The story also uses this beautiful metaphor to describe the purity of the whole event. The birth is compared to a perfect, flawless jewel being placed on a piece of the finest silk. The jewel doesn't stain the silk, and the silk doesn't scratch the jewel. And why is that? Because both of them are perfectly pure. It's a symbol for a consciousness entering the world without being dirtied or tainted by it. Which brings us all the way back to where we started, our opening mystery. The walking, talking baby and his totally shocking declaration. So now that we have our linguistic tools, let's go back and re-examine what he actually said. Agohamasmi lokasa. I mean, on the surface, it sounds super arrogant, doesn't it? Like a claim to worldly power? But let's break down the 2 key words here using our Niruti method. What do they really mean at their root? Okay, the first word is ago, which usually gets translated as chief, but its root, agra, doesn't mean ruler or king. It means a peak, a summit, the foremost point, the absolute pinnacle of something. It's all about reaching the highest state possible. And then there's the second word, loka, which we always translate as the world, but its root, lujati, actually means to disintegrate or to crumble. So loka isn't really talking about planet Earth or some kingdom. It's referring to the transient, always changing, crumbling world of our conditioned existence. So when we put these deeper root meanings back together, the statement is just completely transformed. I am the chief of the world becomes I am at the peak of this transient world. It's not a boast of ego at all. It's a declaration of liberation. He's saying, I have reached the highest point possible within this crumbling, impermanent reality.
And the very next thing he says confirms this perfectly. He doesn't say, now I will rule over you all. He says, this is my last birth. Now there is no more renewed existence. He is declaring his freedom from the transient world, not his mastery over it.
So, okay, that's a cool linguistic puzzle. But why does any of this matter to us today? Well, because the text itself tells us that all of these big, cosmic, mythical events are really pointing to something very intimate and very human, the nature of our very own mind. Later in that very same text, the Buddha is asked to explain what all these marvels are really about. And his answer just brings everything crashing down from the heavens and places it directly into our own everyday experience. He says the real unprecedented event, the actual marvel, is this: simply knowing your feelings as they arise, knowing them as they stay for a while, and knowing them as they fade away. And the same for your thoughts and perceptions. To have that unbroken stream of awareness, just watching the constant flow of your own mind, that, he says, is the miracle. So, in the end, you can see this whole elaborate, miraculous birth story as one big, beautiful metaphor. It's the story of the birth of a fully awakened consciousness, a mind that is perfectly clear, radiant, and finally free from that cycle of suffering. And that really leaves us with a pretty fascinating question, doesn't it? What if these ancient stories of miracles aren't really about supernatural powers at all? What if they're a kind of sophisticated language designed to describe the highest potentials of the human mind? A state of awareness that, just maybe, is accessible to every single one of us.